What's up, guys? Welcome to UFC Jiu-Jitsu Breakdown, brought to you by Shell BJJ right here in Portland, Texas, where we analyze the art of Jiu-Jitsu used at the highest level by UFC competitors, and we break it down for you so you can understand what's happening in the cage and so you can fully grasp the power of Jiu-Jitsu. UFC 302 took place, and Islam Makhachev was able to submit Dustin Poirier with a powerful Darce choke. Before we do a UFC Jiu-Jitsu breakdown, let's make one thing clear. Makhachev has a grappling ability based mainly in Sambo. Sambo is a Russian grappling martial art, and it does share a lot of similarities with Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, and wrestling. So yes, Makhachev is a Sambo practitioner. However, he does train with BJJ black belts to help sharpen his skills, and the submission he applied on Dustin, the Darce choke, is very much a Jiu-Jitsu rooted submission. You really don't see it much in Sambo competitions, and almost never in Judo, and absolutely never in wrestling. But if it makes anyone feel better, we can call this a grappling breakdown. Now on to the fight itself. Makhachev had been out-grappling Dustin the entire fight, but in the 5th round, Dustin was landing some pretty heavy shots on the feet. As a response, Makhachev shoots in for a nice single leg takedown. He turns hard into it and drops to his side to force Dustin to the ground. And Dustin does drop to his butt, but doesn't make it easy for Makhachev. Dustin plants his hand on the ground as base and uses it to lift his hips off the ground in an attempt to get back up and cancel out Makhachev's takedown. Makhachev then takes it a step further and he lifts the leg off the ground and attempts to run around Dustin's hips to grab the other leg, turning it into more of a double leg takedown finish, which if executed perfectly can flatten Dustin's butt back on the ground. Dustin refuses to stay down and manages to instead stand back up to his feet. But Makhachev has now secured Dustin's ankle on his other leg and keeps a single leg attack going. Dustin continues to balance on one leg as Makhachev stands up with the single leg. You can see Dustin pushing down on Makhachev's head and back, working hard to slip his leg out. If he pushes far enough, he could very well rip his leg right out and successfully defend the takedown. But Makhachev is relentless. He knows he has to keep throwing attacks at Dustin or he's going to lose the takedown. So he then steps back, ripping Dustin's ankle towards the mat, but then instantly lifting and pulling it back up. This ripcord-like pull immediately gets Dustin off balance and he starts to actually fall back down. But Dustin has the heart of a champ and refuses to settle. So when Dustin starts to fall, he instinctively decides to spin and turn, which means he would still fall to the ground, but not on his butt or back. Instead, he falls to his hands and knees, which can give him a better fighting chance at getting back up. Makhachev sees Dustin falls to his hands and knees, so he blitzes forward, wrapping up the head and the arm and sprawling his chest on top of Dustin to shut down any chance he might have of getting back up. Dustin pops his hips high into the air. This can make it harder for Makhachev to keep Dustin down and would also make it harder for Dustin to get his back taken. So Makhachev answers with an attack of his own. He cinches tighter on the head and arm control and sits down to his butt, flipping Dustin over. Makhachev back rolls to his knees. So not only has he finished the takedown, but he doesn't release the head and arm and now has locked in what we call an arm-in guillotine, which can be a decently threatening choke. Dustin most likely sees the threat of the choke, so in an attempt of offense, you can actually see Dustin trying to wrap up around Makhachev's leg, turning the position into more of a half guard. A decent half guard can not only make the guillotine less dangerous, but it can also be used to come up for a single leg takedown of his own, which you can see playing out as Dustin sits up to his elbow. Makhachev recognizes this defense, so to counter Dustin's half guard and single leg, he shifts his weight and switches which knee he has on the floor. With all of his weight now driving into the leg that Dustin is wrapping up, he is now much heavier on that side, and this will slow Dustin down. With all the space that has now been created by Dustin sitting up, Makhachev sees his opening to switch to a Darce choke. His arm that is wrapped under the armpit shoots further through, popping out on the side of Dustin's neck. He then takes that hand and wraps all 5 fingers over his other forearm. Normally, the Darce is executed by reaching all the way through and locking up your own bicep, not the forearm. This creates the full power of the choke. But Dustin's arm was reaching up for a decent underhook. This probably made it a little too difficult for Makhachev to reach his bicep, so instead he locked up his forearm. To be able to choke someone with a Darce that's locked up on the forearm usually means you have to apply more power on the squeeze, which obviously Makhachev has, as you can see him curl up, applying massive amounts of squeezing and choking power on Dustin. Makhachev also begins to lay down on his side, which is normally where you want to apply a strong Darce finish. And to make it worse, that half guard that Dustin locked up on Makhachev in response to the guillotine ends up actually helping Makhachev finish the Darce, because now as Makhachev lays to his side to complete the choke, he also has one of Dustin's legs completely trapped, which basically locks down Dustin into place, stuck in a horrible position, unable to move anywhere, getting folded in half while being choked by the Darce. At this point, even with Makhachev unable to fully grab his bicep, he has Dustin in such deep trouble that Dustin has no choice but to tap out. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the power of Jiu-Jitsu. This has been a UFC Jiu-Jitsu breakdown, but remember, you don't have to be some insanely athletic UFC cage fighter to learn this amazing art. Anyone can do it. We have kids classes, we have adult classes. Everyone gets to try it out a week free. So come on over to Shell BJJ right here in Portland, Texas, and give it a try. Thanks for watching this episode of UFC Jiu-Jitsu Breakdown.